From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN Noon News.
Good afternoon and welcome to your MTN News this Tuesday. I'm Augusta McDonnell. Let's get right to our top story. It's being called a landmark suspension. A Billings tow truck company was pulled from the Montana Highway Patrol's rotation list. This after charging a Bozeman lumber company $6,000 for a tow from a crash scene. Here's a look at that crash from April of last year. MTN's David J. explains what happened.
A tough spot to be stuck on the side of the road waiting for a tow truck. A Billings tow truck company has been on a 6-month suspension for charging 2.5 to 3 times what is considered reasonable.
The billing in this case was determined by the board to be egregious enough to reach the level of a suspension.
Stranded along the highway, a tow truck, your only hope of getting your car to where it can be repaired. Many have encountered that nightmare, the bill never cheap, but few of us have ever received a $6,700 bill just to have our vehicle towed 4 miles.
I'll be right up front with you. It gives the industry a black eye.
On April 17th, 2024, Billings-based Anderson Towing charged Kenyon Noble Lumber and Hardware that amount for a tow after a crash in Bozeman. The Bozeman store filed a complaint, ultimately elevated to Montana's Tow Truck Complaint Resolution Committee. That committee's ruling? A suspension from the Highway Patrol's tow truck rotation for 6 months, which means when a stranded driver calls for a tow, Anderson won't be called upon to respond.
6 months, they hadn't handed down a suspension of that length previously.
Scott Wolf is the president of the Montana Tow Truck Association. He says this incident is an aberration, saying 99% of towing businesses are good. But he says the review and suspension were necessary.
Once you get a towing company's attention like that, I would hope that they would stay within the sideboards of industry standards.
You kind of read through the complaint, you start to see the excessive fees, and they start to pile up pretty quick.
Andrew Butler is a supervising attorney for the board that oversees the Tow Truck Complaint Resolution Committee, which broke down those fees. They include $2,526 for a hazmat response, despite the fact less than 25 gallons of fuel spilled, the amount that usually triggers a hazmat response.
It's egregious billing.
In addition, Anderson charged $900 for a wrecker and $450 for a driver. The average cost for both, typically $272.
You usually get the tow truck plus the driver. Well, that was all billed separately, and each bill was excessive.
Then there was the $500 for traffic control signs, cones, and warning lights, which was a hazmat response truck, so there was a double billing. A lien processing of $100, even though the committee determined that there was no need to start the lien process. And the 4-mile transport, that was $110.60.
A typical tow would cost several dollars per mile.
Anderson's suspension from the Highway Patrol rotation is set to be lifted April 30th. Butler and Wolf just hope it will serve as a deterrent for Anderson and others down the road.
It's a big step in putting some of these bad players on notice that they're going to be held accountable for their actions.
In Billings, David J., MTN News.
MTN has reached out repeatedly to Anderson Towing to try and get an explanation for that $6,700 bill. While no one has responded to our request for an interview, the company's owner, Cameron Cochran, did speak with the committee and defended the hazmat charges, saying, quote, his employees provided a proper cleanup and that the amount of oil and fluids involved required hazmat. While Anderson was removed from the Highway Patrol response list, Anderson is still listed in the Yellowstone County rotation.
Well, some areas enjoying some sunshine right now, some others not so much as we take a look at those temperatures out there in the 30s and 40s. Some areas dealing with our next winter storm. It's this area of low pressure that is actually kind of pulling off to the east. In fact, let's go ahead and take a look where it is right now. It's pumping all this moisture into the region, and it's giving some areas a chance at a decent amount of snow. And that's why we do have some winter storm warnings, winter weather advisories in effect. Some of them have gone ahead and expired or canceled out. Even avalanche warnings in effect. So we're going to break this all down with the main forecast as we get ready for spring, which arrives on Thursday morning. Do we have spring-like weather heading to the weekend? We'll let you know.
Now let's take a look at our leading look. First, a man accused in what a prosecutor calls one of the most brazen and horrible crimes in Billings in the last decade pleaded not guilty to charges of deliberate homicide. 19-year-old Godfrey Broken Rope was arrested Sunday after a police pursuit through the Billings West End. Broken Rope was wanted for a drive-by shooting in 2023 that killed 31-year-old Kenneth Morrison and his 1-year-old son on the Billings North Side. Two other people, Myron Goes Ahead and Jane Noses Gun, have already been charged in connection to the crime. Broken Rope's bail has been set at $500,000, and he's scheduled to next appear in court on May 22nd. And a familiar name in law enforcement will be taking over the U.S. Attorney's Office in Big Sky Country, at least temporarily. Kurt Alme has been appointed as the interim U.S. Attorney for the District of Montana by U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi. He'll serve in the position for 120 days or until a presidential nominee has been confirmed by the U.S. Senate. And Governor Greg Gianforte marked St. Patrick's Day by signing a bill into law yesterday aimed at boosting Montana's economic ties with Ireland. Senate Bill 320, sponsored by Senator Mike Cuffey, creates a Montana-Ireland Trade Commission. It's tasked with promoting trade, investment, and academic exchanges with the country. The bill passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. Several current and former lawmakers were on hand Monday to perform an Irish song at the ceremony. Leaders said with the strong cultural ties that are shared between Montana and Ireland, it makes sense to strengthen their economic relationship as well.
Over the last week and a half, the Senate Ethics Committee heard 3 days of testimony on Senator Jason Ellsworth's handling of a state contract. Now, the committee is working on a report they'll submit to the full Senate as the chamber considers whether to pursue any further action against Ellsworth. Ellsworth, a Republican from Hamilton, was Senate president through the end of last year. In that role, he approved a contract with a former business associate to do follow-up work on a slate of judicial reform bills. A legislative audit division report said because that contract was initially split into two smaller contracts, it appeared it was an attempt to go around the rules for awarding state contracts. The Ethics Committee heard testimony from legislative staff and the Montana Department of Administration about what led up to the awarding of the contract. Ellsworth himself did not testify. His attorney, Joan Mell, again told the committee their investigation seemed politically motivated, and that Ellsworth wasn't the one responsible for splitting the contract and hadn't tried to evade scrutiny.
Consider this a learning lesson. Consider this an education process for everyone, but do not find that there was a disclosable personal or private interest, because there simply is no evidence of that extra piece that's required.
Adam Dirk, the special counsel working with the Ethics Committee, made his own closing statement, saying the biggest question was why Ellsworth didn't disclose his ties with the contractor.
I certainly can't tell you what to do as special counsel, so I'd ask you to consider this question. Can anyone plausibly argue that there is no appearance of impropriety in the Agile contract after everything you've heard?
On Monday, the Ethics Committee began going through a 17-page draft report based on the hearing. Lawmakers said their goal was to keep the findings focused on fact and let the full Senate decide how to move forward. The Ethics Committee is set to meet again Tuesday morning, where they could finalize their report. In Helena, Jonathan Ambarian, MTN News.
And in health news today, whooping cough, also known as pertussis, has been spreading in Missoula. It mainly affects younger people and can be treated with antibiotics when caught early enough. MTN's Zach Volheim has the full report on what you need to know.
Whooping cough, also known as pertussis, is in Missoula with 22 reported cases. This infection is nothing to mess around with, as I had it when I was a teenager, and it's no joke. I spoke with Missoula Public Health to find out what you need to know to keep yourself safe.
They don't have air. They end up with vomiting. Severe coughing fits is what we see. And it's bad for the babies and for the elderly who are immune compromised.
Pam Whitney, infectious disease specialist at Missoula Public Health, said that across Montana, there have been 134 reported cases in 13 jurisdictions, mainly within younger populations like teenagers and infants. Symptoms of whooping cough may include a cough lasting more than 2 weeks, up to several months, severe coughing fits that may cause a pause in breathing, and vomiting after coughing. And oftentimes, whooping cough has a delayed onset.
If you've been exposed to somebody who has pertussis or diagnosed with it, the incubation period is 9 to 10 days. If you have these symptoms or you know you've been exposed, if you get to a healthcare provider and they can start you on antibiotics.
The infection is spread through the air within 3 feet of someone, as well as on surfaces, like sharing a straw with someone. The best protection from whooping cough is being vaccinated, although there is a lapse when the vaccine is not as effective.
You get a booster at the 7th grade. But then from the 7th grade to, let's say, the 20s, you're not getting that vaccine booster, and so sometimes that pertussis component will start wearing off a little bit.
So if you think you've come in contact with someone who is contagious, make sure to contact your health provider so they can figure out the best treatment to get you as healthy as soon as possible. In Missoula, I'm Zach Volheim, MTN News.